Good morning. Thank you all for tuning in. My name is Jason Williams, here with the Society of Innovators at Purdue Northwest, and we're excited to bring you our second iLearning digital workshop here during this time of quarantine and uncertainty. Normally we would be hosting some workshops in person, but obviously a great opportunity to be able to talk to some other folks here and put together some digital material for you all. This is a collaborative effort between the Society of Innovators and the Leadership Institute at Purdue Northwest. So just very briefly about our organizations. The Leadership Institute at Purdue Northwest prepares Northwest Indiana leaders to excel in an increasingly competitive world. The mission of the Leadership Institute is to train emerging leaders to grow their leadership skills, enabling participants to add their vibrant leadership to our communities. They aim for each participant to become more charismatic and an authentic leader. And the Society of Innovators at PNW aims to contribute economic and community development throughout the region as the champion of innovation in Northwest Indiana. So this morning, we are pleased to have Dr. Kiko Suarez join us this morning, author of a new book, a longtime leader in the corporate world, and now speaker and author. Just added that to his resume. And Kiko, before I get you on here and hand over the mic, formal introduction. So Dr. Juan Francisco Kiko Suarez is a thought leader and keynote speaker on topics ranging from wisdom and leadership to innovation and future trends. He founded MyCareerMD, a leadership counseling private practice, and co-founded Media Moon Communications, a multicultural communications firm. He's worked in executive leadership roles for Lumina Foundation, the United Way, and international corporations like CEMEX and DuPont. A native of Spain and a naturalized US citizen, Dr. Suarez brings more than 25 years of experience in leadership, innovation, strategic impact, philanthropy, and integrated marketing communications. In 2018, he received the NFL Hispanic Leadership Award in Indiana. And in 2014, he presented a TEDx talk in Indianapolis called The 8 Dimensions of Wise Design That Could Change Everything. That talk can be found on YouTube, and we will make sure to share the link following this as well. And specifically, we wanted to invite Dr. Suarez here this morning. I actually had an opportunity to meet you during that TEDx Indianapolis event a number of years ago. So didn't have the pleasure of working directly with you, but I was part of the team working with some of the other speakers at that event. So it's great to reconnect here and come together this morning. But again, specifically, we're talking about this new book, After Walking Through Fire, Thought-Provoking Stories of Leadership and Change. And I guess first is, we talked about this book. I think you said it was the second book you've put together. But right after Walking Through Fire, Leadership and Change. This book just published on March 2nd. Surely you you couldn't have foreseen, the current state of things here with COVID-19 and what's happening in the US, not quite a month and a half after the publishing date, but certainly very timely nonetheless. I guess if you could, provide a little bit about the book and what might be relevant during this time of chaos and uncertainty.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. And thanks for inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege to be with your audience. The book came after a process of selecting some essays that I had already in mind. The title came because I truly believe that leaders go through incredible ordeals in their career. These are stories that I went through, and the coincidence, if you want, or maybe a sad coincidence, is that truly the world is always exposed to this type of very complex environment. And as you know, and probably some of your viewers know as well, in complexity, there's emergence. And these things emerge, and the next time something else will emerge. So one thing that I like to highlight for people is that I talk a lot about wisdom. That was my research, and it's embedded in the book. Every essay that I have, I finish it with a Be Wise hashtag and some advice. The importance of what I found, it was really puzzling to me. I didn't know that after researching or studying wise people, or those considered wise by others, that it is their wisdom system that becomes like a GPS for complexity. And the other thing that I found after researching wisdom is that it is wisdom that gives you the acuity to see, the forest for the trees. You cannot expect to be prepared for all these emerging situations. And wisdom basically becomes that inner system that would allow you to embrace complexity. And so I always tell people, you cannot simplify complexity. Complexity just is. And the world is proving it. So in order to work through this, you have to develop that wisdom system and then apply it to the different circumstances that emerge. So if there was anything in that research that is embedded in the book, is that idea that we have to keep working to flourish ourselves as human beings and help others flourish. And that is going to eventually lead us to the place with, of course, some discipline, to the place where our wisdom system is ready to engage when another situation like this pops up. So.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that introduction. And I appreciate as well, so you did acknowledge this as a collection of essays, right? So it's not necessarily open up, you have to read from front to back. So I've kind of bouncing around, in various sections of the book. And so you'll see even some of the questions related to the book here this morning, right? A number of different topics, obviously, as you reference, right? Certainly they do stay, with that theme of leadership, of wisdom, of, change management. But again, a number of different areas there. And I guess, being timely with, this chaos and change that the world is going through, or at least the change that's about to happen, it's safe to say that, the world in a few months will never look like the world from a few months ago. I think, regardless of what shakes out, that is going to stay true. But I found it interesting, right out of the gates in the foreword of your book, you share that exposure to change gives people perspective and understanding. That change can not only be embraced, but led. So with that, what additional encouragement might you draw from this during a current crisis, and what will this time reveal about our leaders?
Right, that's a great way to start, because change, in my opinion, is the event that defines leaders, right? Is when I say is when the rubber hits the road for leaders. That's when you show your character. That's when you show your leadership skills. And when I talk about leading change, I don't necessarily talk about managing change. I talk more about leading change. There is a difference, and I think that leaders need to take responsibility for leading the change. So the ability to not only embrace it but lead it makes a fantastic difference in the way change basically molds informs the character of the leader. Because to be honest, in change situations, either you change or lead the change, let's say, or you are about to be changed. And, I always say that, everybody remembers Mahatma Gandhi's be the change, but I think it was a very strategic move by him to say, I'm going to lead this thing. Now, it takes a lot of courage, but that's what leadership is all about, to be in front of the change. But eventually, as a leader, change is an opportunity to lead. And so rather than seeing that as, I reject the change, I don't believe in it, it's better to lean in and see to what extent you can contribute with your leadership. And followers of leaders actually appreciate seeing leadership in times of change. So whether it's a corporate change, whether it is a, it's relatively small change like, moving offices, or in this case, working from home, that is an opportunity for leaders to show and to model that change. So, that's what I mean there by embracing it and leading it and leaning on it, and then communicating. That's another part of change that is very important. So lead the change.
Yeah, no, thank you. And again, you talk about really leaning in to the change to lead that. And I thought it was interesting, the second point we had jotted down in our notes in preparation for this morning. You also talk about strategic patience. And so I guess, in a way, it sounds like that could almost be the opposite, right? Of leaning in and, kind of taking immediate action, but now showing strategic patience. And specifically, you discuss in one of your essays that strategic patience is a trait that is prevalent in most of the successful entrepreneurs and executives that you've encountered. So can you share more about that and how leaders might exhibit strategic patience during this time, even as they're trying to lean in and lead?
Absolutely. Yeah, there is, I think that there are two things or two images that I'm going to share with you to give you that idea. One of them is a Roman saying that is festina lente, which is, I'm in a hurry, so let's slow down. And the reason for that is, yes, you recognize that the pace of change is fast. So you, as a leader, you're not denying the pace of change. But when it comes down to acting on certain aspects of this journey, you have to stop and think and pause and reflect so you don't leave people behind. And so that is part of this. The other part of strategic patience that I talk in that particular essay, I don't know if you've ever seen, I'm sure that you have, watched these documentaries of nature when, lions are in the middle of the Serengeti and they actually end up, catching prey. And you see that they wait. They had tons of opportunities to actually hunt, but they have learned, and they're hungry, but they have learned that it's better to wait for the perfect opportunity. Now, in that essay, it basically was triggered by conversations with particularly small business owners and entrepreneurs in times of crisis, where, the fact that you don't have a regular paycheck makes making money, a very urgent thing. And I completely understand it. I'm going through it myself. But the strategic patience, it's about relationships. So if I want to develop a relationship with a client, there's no guarantee that the client will hire me, right? So you're a financial planner, a financial advisor. You know that the sales cycle is long. And so you cannot expect that people that come through your funnel will eventually convert right away. So all these concepts play the role of reminding us that, yes, there is an urgency, and it's good to recognize the urgency as a leader, but at the same time, you have to play the game, understanding that in certain segments of this journey, you have to go slow, you cannot leave people behind, and you have to, actually, in the case of customers, you have to listen carefully and do not expect immediate results, because you're going to basically burn your opportunity. So that is what strategic patience is all about.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that explanation. And I guess that does move us right along, right? Being patient for those opportunities. I thought that was another one. There was an essay, 4 Leaders and 4 Lessons, that you shared in the book. But in that specifically, you talk about learning together and then opportunity scanning mechanisms. And, just thought this is also a time, this extended period of quarantine, working from home is obviously unique. Right. But I think a lot of folks are finding that they have an opportunity to, get better at some skills, during this period, at least take advantage of that, those that are fortunate to be in a more secure situation. But how can teams get better at both of these as far as learning together and opportunity scanning? And then also, how are those lessons related to one another?
Right. Well, that's an interesting point, particularly coming from an innovator and a network of innovators, right? I think this is the time for innovators to shine. And if you have established a good mechanism to identify opportunities, then in a process, obviously, then you're going to be able to actually see, particularly in times of crisis, through your process, you're going to identify opportunities for new business. And that is where I think the connection of the two is very important, because teams, the teams learn individually and together, but a process like this is depends on how you manage it. It's a very exciting prospect where a team of people are looking for opportunities to meet the need of the customer. Now, as you know, and you know this better than me, there are 1,000 ways to skin the cat in this opportunity scanning. But my point there is, whether you look at trends, whether you do research, primary or secondary, listen to your customers, understand your market, understand your competitors, having a mechanism in place when the crisis hits, eventually, what's going to happen is a lot of people will focus on the crisis, rightfully so, right? You have to address it. But the people that actually succeed at the end is the ones that can actually look around the corner and be prepared for the future. So an opportunity scanning mechanism allows you to actually be prepared for that. And, I would encourage people, as part of their innovation process, to have a very well-defined mechanism for identifying new opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. And I would absolutely agree. I have to agree, right? Like you said, coming from the Innovation Network. And one, even we shared in your introduction earlier, right? You do have over 25 years of experience in leading and learning along the way, during that time. So talk about, I guess, this opportunity scanning during a time of uncertainty. I mean, certainly there's some significant differences between what's happening now and, say, 9/11 or the 2008 recession. But I guess the similarity is that in some way, shape, or form, right, those are at least two other significant periods of uncertainty that our country has gone through. So can you talk about this opportunity scanning idea, and how it may look now during a time of chaos and uncertainty, and then how it may look during a time of relative stability?
Right. So obviously, if you have a practice of innovation or strategic foresight, you're going to be looking into the future with a different lens than the majority of the people, right? So I would really strongly encourage people to have that. I happen to learn from the best, and it was a pleasure. But the amazing thing about having a process like this is that you will not be able to anticipate when, obviously, but you might be better prepared for scenarios that to other people look really crazy. I'm going to give you an anecdote. I remember back in the day when I was in the middle of this course as a seminar about strategic foresight, that then I have used as part of my research, and then I have used with my clients to do visions that are long-term visions and do backcasting. So if you're in a company and you say, well, what is the 2050 vision for us? It puts the whole team into a completely different mindset. Now, crises, when they emerge, you have to tackle them. So being able to balance the now without losing perspective about the future is extremely important in times of crisis, because what's going to happen is once the crisis ends, you have, as you mentioned, a new normal. There's considerable, I would say, signs that there is going to be a new normal. And yes, you and I probably have learned how to do Zoom better, and everybody is probably a little bit better at this. But is the organization ready to make a significant change? And now is the time to prepare for future scenarios and meeting those opportunities and those needs. So, at least in my experience, the idea of having a mechanism again of scanning opportunities works both in calm and in crisis times. In both cases, it's something that needs to really involve more people than just the office in the corner, right? I always say innovation is a mindset, it's not a title. So you have to have a process that involves multiple areas of the organization to look into the future and to look for opportunities. But when that crisis hits, your resources are reshaped to attend the crisis for sure. right? It would be irresponsible not to. But at the same time, if you don't keep an eye on what's coming, and that kind of process allows organizations to look forward and say, how is this going to look in 3 months, in 6, in 10? And, you know, as I said in those seminars, I learned that it's very possible to have a good scanning, not only environmental scans, which are kind of more current, but scanning of future plausible scenarios, and that you can be better prepared. And in one of those seminars, I remember clearly, the professor was putting together a series of things that really sounded super futuristic. And one of them happened the next day. Then you know, there was an announcement out of the blue that we all look at each other like, okay, what, do you have a crystal ball or something? Right. And he was just basically following you know, some techniques about trending and strategic foresight. And that was one of the plausible scenarios that eventually happened, right? Mm-hmm. So I hope that that encourages your audience and their own organizations to think about this that way.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think it definitely is a good dose of encouragement. And yeah, I guess I immediately want to start now deep diving into, you know, maybe some of the specific methods and tools you know, that you might use as far as some of these mechanisms. But I guess that'll be another session for another day to yeah, the nuts and bolts of that. But thank you for that overview. So I'm going to stick with the innovation theme a bit, but kind of shift us in a slightly different direction and kind of close out some specific questions about the book. But yeah, I think another, you know, key element that really, you know, helps you stand out as a leader is, you know, the multicultural aspect you bring to the table. So, right, you are a multicultural leader, having lived and worked in different regions of the world. And one theme, I think, as a result of that, that really is strong throughout the book is also about diversity. You know, whether that be diversity of color, true diversity of people, diversity of thinking, of background and industry. But from you and your career experiences, why is this important? And you know, how has your career supported those views?
Right. Well, in my particular case, because I'm an immigrant and I lived in different countries and I have a funny accent, it plays in an interesting way, right? But it becomes, I think that when you start looking at, let's say, equal access to opportunity, it becomes like a value, a personal value. And in my case, I moved from corporate to nonprofits, philanthropy, and along the way, I felt that it was part of my value set to make sure that you know, multiple opinions are heard. You know, I was rereading yesterday one of the books from Jack Welch, and you may agree or disagree with the guy in terms of how aggressively he was going after winning, but one of his points is that leaders have to give voice and preserve the dignity of the people that are there, and so there's a lot embedded in diversity, as you say. It's not only a racial conversation, although it is, but it's also a diversity of thought, diversity of cultures, and there's plenty of research that proves that the more diverse your group is, the more possibilities you will open. And so I'm a big fan of it. I'm just going to say one thing about this to your audience, because you gave me a chance to talk in Spaniards Talk, that for me, diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging are 4 different concepts. Diversity, I say, and some other people say, it's a fact. Whether you're diverse or not, it's a matter of numbers, right? You know, do you have enough people that are diverse? And it's not just racially, which it is, but how diverse is your organization is a fact. Inclusion is a process, and it's very critical to be inclusive in a meeting, in how you lead, because you don't want people to feel that they are not part of the organization. Then equity is more of a goal. It's aspirational, equitable access to opportunity. We know that there are disparities that are real in society, so you have to strive to have that equity, even in your organization. Is there equal access to certain opportunities? And then finally, belonging is a product of all of it, right? It's the outcome. I feel that I'm part of this. So I wanted to say that because some people use diversity and inclusion and equity interchangeably, and in my opinion, they are not, but they are all related, of course.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Actually, I appreciate that explanation of kind of defining those four different areas. And again, I would love to. I'm sure we could deep dive into all four of those and continue talking about the importance of each. And like you said, there's a lot of research that backs up from different aspects of maybe, the facts of diversity, right? How diverse teams are more innovative. And I'm sure we could overlay that with, you go back to some of the traits you've found with the successful entrepreneurs and executives. I'm sure we could correlate that with diversity as well. So thank you for that. So that was some of the specific questions about content from the book, but you also wanted to just talk about, some of your other topics that you work with. Obviously, you've already referenced a lot of this went into the book, but the first one, and even at the front of this conversation, you really highlighted that a lot of your work and research focuses not just on leadership, but also on wisdom. And of course, we have to clarify, right? There's a difference between wise people and wise guys. but right, as you were looking at wisdom and that concept, why was the topic of wisdom important to you as you did all this work?
Yeah, I went deep into this kind of, absorbing, reflective moment, right, when you're going through your research. And I was looking for something that was essential, that was kind of fundamental. And, I started to look for, again, essence as even as a label, what is essential? And what I found is that wisdom is a differentiating, call it mechanism, concept, whatever you want to call it, that is specific to humans, to humanity, to being human. And it was very interesting for me to actually peel off some of the ideas that were behind this concept. There's tons of research on this topic. And, my contribution was, I wanted to find like the top few dimensions of wisdom, knowing that it's multidimensional, that I felt that wise people use. And in the run of, doing that kind of research, I learned so much about it that, I ended up being exactly in the place where I wanted to be. It's basically the culmination of being a human. I always say, by the way, as a joke, that the research didn't make me any wiser, but I recognize now some of the traits that those that are considered wise by others have, and it's fascinating that they, during my research, I call it wisdom augmented practices. So say you are a leader, you can augment your leadership with your own wisdom system. And there were so many, good news around this, including this idea that is your GPS for complexity, that I found it incredibly fascinating. After the talk that you referenced, that TEDx that happened in Indianapolis, a lot of, leadership development people and coaches and all that came to me and said, well, how do we practically do this, right? And there's this appetite for practical things. And I always felt that this is more of a kind of self-development, self-actualization instrument, if you want. So the attempt to put out there, a list of steps for people to develop their wisdom system, it would be difficult. So I basically came up with these 8 dimensions. And I also enjoyed having different points of views. I remember I even talked about it during the TED Talk, the idea that a guy told me once that they figured it all out. in their corporation that wisdom was knowledge and experience on steroids. And I was like, no, it's more than that, right? So I really went deep into understanding how wise people use ethics, how they use intuition, how they use the ability to look at time, present, past, and future at the same time every time, which is kind of fascinating. And so, back to the idea of essential to humans, I think that as we are moving into a more technologically driven knowledge/data society, we as humans better preserve that uniqueness.
Yeah, that's great. No, thank you for that. And I guess, again, you're doing a great job of queuing up these questions, right? You talk about, just the importance of wisdom and the times we're in. In your great wisdom over your years of experience, are we living in uniquely turbulent times?
Every time, I personally, for my observation, it's every generation thinks that their moment is more turbulent than the past. And the truth of the matter is, the world is complex enough that it's going to become even more complex. So over time, the moments will be more and more turbulent, but at the same time, humans are going to be better prepared to deal with those wide waters. If we do the job that we have to do, like we're doing now, of reflecting how best can we prepare. So I have a slide that I used basically in 2014, 2015, that I have a lot of fun with it because it's a slide with 4 quadrants. And in one quadrant, there is a picture of a virus. At the time, it was Ebola, but it doesn't matter. You have a virus. On another quadrant, you have Putin, which happens to stay there. In another quadrant, I have a stock market crash. And in another quadrant, I have, at the time, it was ISIS, but the Middle East conflict. And if you think about those 4 quadrants, viruses we have, Putin we have, stock market crash we have, and then still tension in the Middle East we have. So it's the same thing, and it's as turbulent as it was, but it's getting more and more complex over time because, as a friend of mine used to say, he got a job. He was new to something, and he said, I'm going to figure all this out, right? And you know that when you go to an organization, there are things that you are not going to be able to simplify. Back to the idea of complexity. They are there as part of the culture. So this guy was telling me, I thought there was this web, and I kind of pull it out, and then I found another web underneath, and then I pulled that one out, and there was another web underneath. So he basically said, I gave up, and I'm trying to make my contribution in this context. And that is a wise way to approach this. It's, the world is complex. Don't try to simplify it. Try to contribute. And by the way, I also like to say it is okay to look for simplicity. It's different than simplification, right? We should look for simplicity, but simplicity is a higher understanding of the order of things. So you can actually design something that is very simple if you design it from the beginning. But if it's part of an ecosystem, there's going to be a complexity that you're not going to be able to reduce. And so that's the whole idea behind these concepts. And, I hope that is entertaining enough if you want, but at the same time, it clicks on people and say, wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And obviously, right, right now we're asking, about this turbulence in the time of, probably more significant turbulence than the world has ever seen, at least, at a global scale. But right, that to your point, turbulence will, I guess, come and go. Maybe it doesn't ever totally go, but right, no doubt the turbulence we're in the middle of, some of that is going to settle down, right? The turbulence is going to lessen. But again, you kind of talk about that complexity, that this turbulence can create complexity, but you also referenced the fact that some organizations are just simply more complex than others. So, even taking the turbulence factor away, just looking at kind of the complexity of business or organizations, I mean, how else, may leaders cope with complex situations?
Right. Well, first of all, embracing it, right? If you are, say you're put as a new leader in an organization and you have these great ideas on what is the perfect world, what you need to go is with an open mind, trying to understand the organization. If you've been there for a long time, there are certain things that you already know. And culture in particular is a fascinating concept, as you know, is the unwritten rules, right? They're not written anywhere, but we have to be careful with X. So that is a lot of oral history that is transmitted over the years of existence of a company. So the bigger it is, the longevity of the organization, it starts to create a culture. And whether it was intentional by the leader or not, that is something that is part of the mix of complexity. But what I would say is, again, back to the fundamental concept of wisdom, not only as a GPS for complexity, but also as a mechanism that has a higher purpose that is shared by all of us as human beings. And the higher purpose is, I describe it as human flourishing for self and others. That is something that leaders can do every step of the way, whether it is in a crisis or not. You can help people flourish at the same time that you do it for yourself. So, again, self-actualization, helping others grow at the same time, that is the role of a leader. Then you can focus the energy, then you can have goals. But I think in complex times, let's not forget that you are surrounded by people. And that is what eventually will solve the situation. It's just how people react. So, take care of your people, help them grow. And that is the fundamental aspect of what leadership in complex times is all about.
Okay, no, thank you. Great clarification. So I appreciate that. Another concept, and I guess I may have suggested this about your work earlier, but this idea of change management, and I guess you do have a take on that and wanting to clarify maybe some of your concepts and just the idea of change management.
Yeah, well, I believe in change management. I don't want to say that you cannot manage change, but I like to challenge people to think that, because that when you say you can manage change and you can manage people, it's I'm not going to say it's an antiquated concept, because there's a lot to management. I don't want to pit leadership and management against each other, although obviously there are different skills. But I like to think about leading change instead of managing change, because it's more both inspirational to the people that will eventually get into be part of that change. So yes, there are certain decisions that you have to make that are more managerial, who stays and who leaves and this and the other. But at the end of the day, you have to take the change, as I said before, as an opportunity to lead, and then prove that you can be seen as someone that will help us bridge from where we are to where we need to be. Because people are different, they have different motivations, and it's your job as a leader to lead the change. I like to say to some people, and I think that I have an essay in the book that is about this. I say, well, what if we got this wrong for years, right? Because we all think that leadership is about people and change is a process. What would we do if we, for a second, think that leadership is a process and change is about people? How would you react to that concept? And I think that it would actually change a lot of things, quote unquote, no pun intended, because change is about people. And so that is, to me, the critical aspect of this that we need to consider.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. So we've done a lot of talking on, specifically about the new book and some of the topics in there. we've certainly referenced some of your speaking engagements and some of the work that you've done on that front. But apart from being an author and a speaker, you also launched a business called MyCareerMD. Can you share a little more about that as we start to wrap this up?
Yes. So basically, it's what I call a leadership practice. I like to think that leaders of all ages and seniority levels can be better leaders over time. Some of these concepts that we talked about, leading change, strategic thinking, innovative mindsets. I also include sustainability and social impact. So I basically put together a framework called LD6 that focuses on some dimensions of leadership that I think, if you want to think about them as leadership competencies, that are not really taught out there comprehensively in many leadership development programs. So I do that as part of MyCareerMD. I'm also helping, as I said, different seniority levels, but I'm more excited about the millennial generation because they are already the generation that is about to rule the world if it's not ruling it already. There's this misconception of millennials as, the young guys that are still not clear about their future. And that is a incredible misconception. I'm done with hearing that concept because millennials are, the breadwinners and the family builders and basically the owners of companies and in many cases, leaders already. So as the boomer generation and the X generation begins to retire, I'm particularly very inspired to help with people that are millennials, that are leaders, that will be in the C-suite. And, I help them through either one-on-one or group development. So that's what MyCareerMD is all about.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And is there anywhere we can find more information on that work?
Yeah, so basically it's mycareermd.net. And there they can contact me or they can contact me through LinkedIn. I'm an open networker. Unfortunately, a lot of people are trying to sell me stuff, but I still think that LinkedIn is a place to connect more than the selling services. But I'm more than happy to accept any connections there. So mycareermd.net and LinkedIn are the places to find more about it.
Perfect. Yeah, we will make sure to get that information out as well. And then finally, just as we do have a few minutes here to close this out and wrap up our conversation this morning, are there any specific, give us 3 takeaways that you would like people to remember from our chat this morning?
Right. Well, what I'm going to give you is 3 takeaways that I have for in general about these concepts that we talked. One is this idea that complexity cannot be simplified, and wisdom is your GPS for complexity. I want you to remember that because it's very, very important that you embrace it as is instead of just kind of going crazy and trying to simplify it. But there is a way out, and your wisdom system, as you develop it and as you become wiser, you don't have to wait to be wiser. You can work on it right now. And so that is concept number 1. I think concept number 2, and we're finding more about this, is trust, right? To me, trust is currency, and it has to be earned. And if there's no trust, there's no deal, right? So it's a fundamental concept that organizations need to understand, and that individuals need to understand, and it's part of developing relationships in calm times. So then when crisis comes in, at least you have the social capital that is already built, because it's going to be based on that you can survive out of a critical situation. And the last concept for me associated with innovation and with all this thing, leadership, is be bold, do epic stuff. This is a time, by the way, where innovators need to come out of their closets and be both happy to contribute and also come up with crazy ideas that no one is thinking about because they have probably developed both the personality and professional traits to actually be extremely useful in this kind of in these times. So be wise, think about trust as something important, and then do epic stuff.
Fantastic. No, those are some great, I think, applicable thoughts and takeaways to end on. So, Kiko, I really appreciate you carving out the time to sit down with us this morning. Again, I can show everyone your book. So here again, After Walking Through Fire, just out March 2nd. So again, very timely, considering what we're going through now and what I guess we are walking through fire right now. So
yes.
Hopefully a good playbook for the months to come. And that is available on Amazon.com. So I think available in print and the Kindle version. So
right.
Please be sure to check out Kiko's book there, and obviously on MyCareerMD.net as well. So again, thank you so much. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, and congratulations for putting this. I know that is an important effort to keep us all connected and to build community, even in these times. And you're doing a fantastic job. You've always done it, so I'm very happy to see that you're bringing your craft to this virtual online world.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and see you soon.